working on the shades there, so you'll be able to see the slides a bit better. So you heard a little bit about some of my outdoor adventures. So it's always a little funny when someone asks me that question, you know, what's your Everest? Because I'm like, Everest. And you know, I'm also an author. My book's called On the Edge. My favorite Amazon review said, all the suspense of Into Thin Air, but without the depression. And that's actually a photograph of me on the cover. People think it's an illustration, but it's a photo of me climbing Denali in Alaska, which is the highest peak in North America. And people ask me for advice on this mountain all the time. They always say, Denali, it's really cold and steep. Give me some advice. So I just say, stay left. But what I thought I'd do in the time we have together is share with you guys some of my favorite lessons from the book, focusing on the American Women's Everest Expedition, because this is a climb where I think I learned more great lessons about leadership, about tackling challenge and overcoming obstacles than any other trip that I'd been on. So this is a climb that took place in 2002. In 2001, I got a phone call asking me if I wanted to serve as the team captain for this trip. And initially when I got the phone call, I said no. Just because, even though I had climbed the highest peak on 6 continents and had done a lot of other climbing in between, I still really felt like, was it going to be good enough or fast enough or strong enough? And it just felt like way more challenge than I was ready to take on at the time. But then I realized that there was only going to be one first American Women's Everest Expedition, and if I didn't step up to the plate to be the team captain, somebody else was going to do it. Somebody else was going to be living my dream adventure. So I ended up calling this woman back and agreeing to serve as the team captain. And at the time, I still really didn't know if I had what it was going to take to get up that mountain. But I knew if I didn't step up to the plate and try, that I would never find out. And I think there are times in your life where you just have to step up, even if you feel like you aren't ready. And I ran across this quote when I was contemplating the whole thing. It's a quote by the first woman who ever climbed Mount Everest. Her name's Junko Taibei. She's from Japan. And she reminds us that it's not just about technique and ability. It's also very much about willpower. So I knew for sure that I had willpower, but one thing I knew for sure that I didn't have was money. I was about $70,000 in debt thanks to all my student loans, and no one else I knew who was a climber had any money. So we had to go out and raise the funds for this trip. And I ended up connecting with a friend of mine who worked for Ford. Just because I didn't know you guys yet, I would have hit some of you up for some money for sure. Yeah, for sure. But my friend Kevin, who worked for Ford, he helped us funnel the idea of the first American Women's Everest Expedition up to the senior Ford executives in Michigan, and they looked at our proposal. They actually agreed to fund the entire trip. And the reason that Ford agreed to fund us was because our expedition just happened to coincide with the launch of their new full-size SUV, which is of course the Ford, exactly, the Ford Expedition. So it was their expedition in conjunction with our expedition, and it was this match made in heaven. And I was so relieved that things worked out well with Ford, just because I was also negotiating with Chevy at the time. And their full-size SUV is the Avalanche. Yeah. So call me crazy, but I'm just thinking if you're going to go to Everest, you want to be sponsored by the expedition, not by the Avalanche. So it worked out pretty well. Next thing I had to do was pull together the team, and this was a really interesting process. And the person who I think gives the best recruiting advice is Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski. He actually wrote the foreword for my book. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Coach K, he's the head men's basketball coach at Duke University, and he's the winningest coach in the history of Division I college basketball. And for those of you who don't care about college basketball, and for Duke haters, because I know you're out there, yeah, there's someone in every crowd, I know. You guys bear with me for a second, because Coach K was also the head men's basketball coach of the U.S. national team, right? Our U.S. men's Olympic basketball team, so even if you hate Duke, you kind of have to appreciate that, right? Because they brought home several gold medals.